Now, the next question is, obviously, all of you have worked with the physical, mobility testing. Obviously, Gene, you were involved with creating them. So, Christine, from your perspective, physical and virtual mobility assessments of visual function being part of all the trials, what do you think are the potential advantages of this digitized form of the MLMT, the MLoMT, which you were alluding to earlier, versus the physical? Do you think there are advantages, and is it changing how we are going to continue to evaluate these patients in the future, and how does it relate to the endpoints required by the regulatory agencies?
Yeah, great questions, and I think there are certainly advantages. I think that the fact that it is virtual, the headset that's already been utilized in a number of patients, so we have good safety data on that, like Jean had mentioned. I think probably most importantly, the idea of being able to cover a spectrum of ceiling floor patients and be able to potentially use this in a number of different types of LCA. There are certainly types of LCA where a physical MLMT might be perfect. Example, Spark Therapeutics of Retigene, Parvavac, and I think that there are examples where that physical maze happens to be perfect for that LCA form. There are other forms of LCA where there may be a floor effect or a ceiling effect. I think being able to have a virtual maze, no test is the same, the things we learned about from Gene, of avoiding the learning effect, being able to have multiple different parameters that you can change. I was learning quite a bit about this. I have not used at my site a virtual maze yet, but I'm excited if that happens in the future to be able to experience that and see that as my patients go through, and being able to alter things like the color and the shape and the luminance, to be able to alter that per test, have a different test each time, and have an immediate response rather than wait for the reading center response, which I've experienced that. And I think from my patient perspective, when I send them off, and I won't name the specific company and the specific trial, but when I send them off to a physical maze for a clinical trial that they've recently been doing right now at my site, they're going to be gone for 6 hours, or if not 8 hours, and that's the day. And I have 2 staff that go and do physical maze with these patients, and it's a decent logistical consideration for a site to take the staff and train the staff to run some of these physical mazes. And then it's also a large room. It's actually an off-site facility because some of these larger mazes need to be in a relatively large room. So that might be transit for a patient to get to an off-site facility. Versus it sounds like this headset, and then of course the patients are still in a room moving around, but logistically it might be easier to employ to a number of different sites, to a number of ex-US sites as we get into other countries and try to use other countries. I know there are many countries where having a large room is a difficult problem to employ in some of these clinical trials. So I think, of course, you had mentioned at your last end of the question there, regulatory steps. Of course, we need to be able to educate the FDA and get to a validation and be able to get these things validated and approved. But it sounds like that's underway. So I think that I think it's going to be, an excellent solution to a problem of how to employ these types of functional vision mazes, which the FDA wants in clinical trials, and to have a more realistic option of what's potentially more logistically feasible for our patients.
No, those are great comments. It sounds like it's a patient-friendly, site-friendly, efficient way to do this testing. Thomas, you used in these patients this test, and you have used the physical one in the past. Were you able to tell that it was even from your site perspective?
So the reason for designing the test was basically for ease of use, but also to do things that we cannot do, at least with the current mobility test that is FDA approved. We here at Penn, we had also done other physical kind of mobility tests, and they always have this problem of you design the test to deliver a measure, being the minimum amount of light that the patient needs to see the space around them and detect objects, so they're very kind of custom built, whereas in the virtual reality space you have the flexibility of basically with the touch of the button, not only change the conditions in which you're delivering the test, but changing the space itself, which would require an immense amount of time, and it would always have limitations. And as Jean had mentioned before, scaling of the test, which is something that we have never been able to do in the physical space, and what is obviously very relevant for the pediatric population, is very easily done on the visual reality space. I see a lot of children. I see patients at Children's Hospital Philadelphia, and I always worry that we are totally focused on the adolescents and older patients and are somewhat neglecting not me in particular, but in general, the field. And the visual reality actually poses a friendly, basically, environment to them. Sometimes they are already familiar with using video games. And so instead of having them to sit in front of an FST, I'm not saying that we're going to substitute the FST with the mobility test, but it's a friendly also way of delivering tests. And we were surprised when we initially tested the system years ago to see that kids would put it on and go about doing the test without complaining too much. So it's I think I'm hoping that that will be appreciated by others, and that it would offer the possibility to adapt the testing algorithms to a specific questions in terms of the functioning of the retina in an easier way, and expand the applicability of the mobility and orientation test to not only the severity spectrum of these diseases, but to specific patients, populations, and dysfunctions.